Hi everyone, today we'll be discussing quality agreements. It's a topic I think we take lightly, if I would say. Okay, so my point of view is always from manufacturing, right? It's something we take lightly. We don't focus so much into developing our quality agreements. We spend so much time developing it, and we don't apply it. So we don't look at it. We just keep it somewhere in one of our document folders, so it becomes one of the quality systems. But let's look at what it takes to design one, what one should entail, and how we should actually develop it. So that's what we'll be looking at today. Great. I will take us through this, but first of all, a quick introduction of myself. I am Dominic Pongboracha. My background is in chemical engineering. I have an MBA in finance and investments. I am an ISO 9001 and FSSC lead auditor. I am a certified Six Sigma associate and a master black belt holder. I have over 10 years in manufacturing, which ranges from personal care, household care, pharmaceutical, and biotech. So great. What are we going to be learning today? The background knowledge of quality agreements, the application of quality agreements, the structure of quality agreement, and what to include and who to assign it to. Good. So I see quality agreement as a legal document. I would love to start from there, but it's a document that defines both specific quality parameters for a supplier. It could be a vendor or a third party who is responsible for executing the quality parameters, right? So when I say it's a supplier, so you have a supplier who supplies you a particular raw material, you should have a quality agreement with that supplier. These are the specifications that I want my material to come with. These are my expected standards. I want you to follow this standard. I want you to at least have maybe an ISO certification, right? I want you to follow GMP when making this product. I want you to go through this level of disinfection and all of that. All of this you need to detail. If it's for a contract manufacturing, this is how I produce my products. This is how I want you to produce it for me. This is the standard I want you to follow. This is how I want you to store. This is how I want you to ship and all of that. These are all that we put into the quality agreement. If you see the example I have here, it says a major element of such a supplier qualification program is the quality agreement between the manufacturer, for example, an API, and the buyer or the user of the API, right? So quality agreements should include all aspects that impact quality topics, and this could be deviation handling, change management, testing, like I mentioned earlier. It could be hygiene monitoring. Put everything that you want or you expect from the supplier, the vendor, the CMO, or the EMO to do or to operate as. You need to put it in the quality agreement. The compliance status, the regulatory requirements. I follow FDA. Please ensure you follow the standards that FDA has set, or I follow ANVISA. Please ensure that you follow the standards that ANVISA has set. Product identity, safety, potency, and purity. All of these you should be able to put into your quality agreement. So this is one thing that's very important that I think we should all know about quality agreements. So the quality agreement, like I mentioned earlier, is a legal binding document. And what are the areas we could apply it? It could be a vendor, it could be a raw material packaging supplier, it could be an equipment supplier, it could be a calibration vendor. And it's important, depending on the standard that you follow, but I know for a minimum, as a minimum requirement, you should have a quality agreement for any of these persons, because that's where you detail what we have agreed you should do and what are the quality implications and the quality applications for what you are doing for. You cannot have a raw material, packaging material supplier, and you don't have a quality agreement that defines this is a specification that I expect. When you have deviation, this is how I expect you to handle it. This is how I expect to be notified. This is what I want you to do. This is what is expected when from a quality agreement, and this is what you should include, right? So the quality agreement, there should be a quality agreement at any time anytime a contract company is used. There's no argument to that, right? There should be a quality agreement when you also want to receive a material for your own production, right? So the reason is this: I want to receive bottles from a particular manufacturer, and I want it to come at these times, at this level of neatness, cleanliness. I expect it to be blown at their site. I expect it to be purified at their site. I expect, for example, disposables. I expect this level of detail when it comes to sterilization. Should it be X-ray? Should it be gamma? And all of that. You should be able to detail it in your quality agreement, so that when there's a breach, you have the right to reject that material. So when developing a quality agreement, keep in mind that quality agreement should clearly describe the material services to be provided, quality specifications and communication mechanisms between the owner and the contractor, right? Great. So these are the things that are important that you should have in your quality agreement. Some other factors that we could look like, or items we could include in QA. The one I think you should always, for every documentation, as long as we're following quality management system, is that we should use clear language. The vendor, the supplier, the CMO, the EMO that we are working with must understand what we are documenting in the quality agreement. So we need to use clear language. We need to include all activities that ensure compliance with GMP. Now I'm talking from manufacturing point of view, right? You should describe material and services that is expected. I expect that calibration is done 2 times that's biannually, and I expect that you have this standard, and the standard that you use for my calibration is XYZ, and I expect that you renew yours annually. There should be no point where you come to calibrate my equipment and your standard or your standards are not calibrated. All of those details that we need to put in our policy agreement, right? So list all applicable sites with addresses. Okay, in my quality agreement, this is where my DP is being manufactured. It should be in your quality agreement. This is where the DS is manufactured. It should be in my quality agreement. But this is all you do for me. All you do for me is produce this product. You are not allowed to pack. So you're producing, I'll give you an example, you're producing soap for a particular manufacturer. So you're an external manufacturing organization, and the manufacturer just wants you to make a bulk liquid soap. You shouldn't package it. I'll package it, right? So you produce in bulk and ship to them. There's a breach when you decide to package, right? Or when you are packaging in the wrong container, or the container you are using to package was not properly sterilized. If the manufacturer comes to your site to do a check. So state all audit expectations. How often do you want to audit the supplier? The supplier should know, I will be auditing you annually, virtually, or I'll be auditing you every 2 years, physically, annually, virtually. I'll be auditing my CMOs at these varying times. All of this needs to be properly stated. So list expectations for inspections, communications of findings. How are you going to communicate your findings? How would you explain how these documents that you expect from the CMO, the EMO, the vendor, or the supplier? All of this should be properly stated in your quality agreement. So we get what should be there. So we should be clear in terms of roles and responsibility. I always advise that when you develop a quality agreement, that you put the roles. So there should be a page where you have the roles and responsibility for both parties. Okay, I am the company owner, Dorian Process Services, of the vendor. In this case, I'll put principal consultant to my team in there should also be there, and we all sign, right? And from your side, you should put those who are the functional leads in this project that we are handling, right? So both parties should be clear. Who should be our points of contact for communication? Who should we send a mail to when there's a challenge? All of these things should be clearly stated in the quality agreement. So include key contacts include quality assurance unit representatives. Be clear regarding quality expectations and requirements. Very clear. I want bottles of 16.4 gram weight, plus or minus 2. Very clear. There should be a specification sheet, maybe as an appendix to that you would, the specification of bottles we'll be receiving from you should be this specification, and you can find it in the appendix of this quality agreement, appendix 111 of III of this quality agreement. This is how detailed it should be. Includes subcontracting expectations. What expectations would you have if I'm giving you this liquid soap to produce? If you would subcontract any part of this manufacturing to a third party, for example, we can't make the premix. We have to give a third party to make the premix, and we'll make the full batch. I need to be part of that process. I want to understand what agreement you have with them. You also need to have a quality agreement with them which aligns, which will sit into our own quality agreement, so that at the end of the day, we have the right product. Don't forget, what is the aim of the quality agreement? Like the name entails, it's a quality agreement, an agreement to produce have services in line with quality, where excellence is being met. This is the idea. So include quality specifications, be clear regarding regulatory requirements. All of these things we need to be clear about. Be clear regarding regulatory requirements. This is very important. You don't want someone, I keep using the example of the liquid soap manufacturer. You don't want to have a liquid soap manufacturer as an external manufacturing organization for you who makes a product that it does not align with the local regulatory. You are meeting regulatory standards. You stated it, but they are not. They are breaking regulatory laws, so you should not. They should ensure that they meet those standards, because when there is a fine, it also affects you. When there is a challenge with their site, then that also affects you. What regulatory inspection or audits are applicable, announced or unannounced, you should be aware. They should be aware. Whenever they are being audited, you should be aware. You should know, because you should also audit them and ensure that they comply with these regulatory standards. Compliance reports, right? Recall management, you should align to this. When there's a recall, I want to know. When you have a challenge, I want to know. Detail of this. How is notification going to happen? Who notifies who? When do we get notified? And all of this. So describe in details how QA parties work together to ensure current GMP compliance, right? How are we going to work together? Should we have regular 2 weeks or bi-monthly quality meetings to discuss products that we have made, deviations that we have, change controls that are in place? How do we do this? Or should we just communicate by writing emails to each other, describe how product information are gained throughout the product lifecycle? This is what I'm talking about. Should we have monthly meetings, or should we just have a monthly report of what has happened in the last 1 month that details the KPIs, the RFT, the specification? We produced 20 batches, and we were able to, and it came out right all first time, or we had 10 deviations within the process. There were minor deviations. That all of those things we need to be able to discuss. So deviations, now look at deviations. How should they be communicated? How should they be investigated? How would you want them to investigate? I don't want investigation to be done with just a fishbone analysis. I want an in-depth investigation. I want this level of investigation. I want to be notified 3 days after the deviation is found. I want to be notified 2 weeks after. If it's a minor deviation, I don't want to be notified. If it's a major deviation, I want to be notified immediately. If it's a critical deviation, I want to be notified within 24 hours. But this level of detail should be in your quality agreement. Who should approve deviations? You should talk about it. Oh, you can approve the deviation as a minor deviation. I must approve all major deviations. I must approve all critical deviations. I must make decision on all of these things. You need to define your quality agreement. This is very important. This is why you have a quality agreement. This is why you have a quality agreement. So change controls. How should they be communicated? When should they be communicated? Who requires? Should there be permissions to implement a change? If you are changing a piece of equipment in your manufacturing, when you're making liquid soap for me, and it's an equipment that has contact with my products, I must be notified. This level of detail, right? If it's an equipment that has little or no impact on, so an impact assessment must be done. Once it's done and it has impact on my process or safety or product quality, I must be notified. All of these things you need to be able to say. All of these things you need to be able to say. And both parties must be aware of the changes that need to be submitted to regulatory. So you should not allow the vendor or the supplier make changes. So imagine changes are being made to your raw material that you're receiving and you're not notified about it. They have changed the way that they sterilize before they send to you, and you are not aware, and it gets to your site and you only do testing for the first 10 batches. So I receive 20 batches in a month, and I do a random check at a particular point. And they had changed the process for sterilizing a particular raw material, and it's in between my sample, and I didn't pick that. And now I have a challenge in my finished product batch. So this is the challenge that you will face because a change has happened on supplier side and you are not notified. So all of this permission, notification must be defined, must be clearly stated in your quality agreement. This is why you have a quality agreement. So you should be taking advantage of validation. How should systems be validated? What process are we using to validate? What standard are we following? So these things you also need to agree. Who will validate? Who will maintain the system? Who would approve validation activities? Who include process validation, design, qualification, verification, CPVs? Who is handling this? Am I doing validation myself? Are you going to do it? I'm going to approve. Am I going to define the process that we're going to use for validation? All of these things we need to clearly state. Okay. So these are the great importance of why we need to write the quality agreement, align on it, and before we start business. Be clear on respect to product release. So I've been using this example of the liquid soap manufacturer, right? The liquid soap manufacturer has made the batch for me, could be in bulk, or maybe we agreed that they could make into bottles. Who releases the product? They do the testing, right? Or are they going to give to me to do the testing? Then I do the release, right? Or are they going to do the testing and release for me to do a final release and ship to trade? So I do the release to trade, why they do the release to warehouse, for example. So all of these details need to be very clear, stated in your quality agreement. Right, so be clear regarding manufacturing expectation. Define manufacturing expectations. How many times do you want the quality inspector to check the products online? How often should they do this? What standards should be in place for cross-contamination, for traceability? How often do you want them to do a mock recall? How often do you want them to do traceability? How do you want them to number the batch? State it in your quality agreement. It's very important. What should be the retest date? What should be expiration standards? What should be storage standard? What should be shipment standard? You cannot ship a product that is on hold to my warehouse. We will make a decision from our side, correct it before it is shipped. Only released products by us should come to our distribution warehouse. You cannot ship to trade from your warehouse. Those level of details should lot dispositions or batch disposition can only be given by us. So this level of detail is what you need to be able to share or show. Great. So you need to be clear regarding inventory. I discussed how we're going to manage storage, transportation, shipping conditions. It should be stored at 2 to 5, 8 degrees Celsius. It should be shipped at the same temperature. All of these conditions should be there. Why? Because you want the vendor to be able to tell you, oh, I can't do it or I can't do it. You need to provide the system for us to be able to do this. We don't have the capability, we don't have the capacity. But you see, when you define this and make it very clear, then it is easy for you to follow. So we need to also be clear on regarding expectation for reviewing documents, approving documents. Who defines the SOPs? Are you going to take my SOPs from my company and use in your site, or are you going to use your own SOPs? But I have to also be a signature to those documents. All of these things we need to be able to define. Electronic records, are they how should they be stored? What is the data integrity policy? Are you going to put that in place? All of these things. So it is very important that we take everything into cognizance when we do this. Okay, one other one is the laboratory, and I think it's the same thing. With every other standard, every other thing we've talked about. So when we talk about laboratory, where should the facility be? How should the facility be? Should the laboratory follow a laboratory standard? How should sampling be done? Who should do the sampling? When should sampling be done? All of these things. Validation of the laboratory. How should testing be done? Should be the 3-point testing? What methods? Who should approve the documents when a test has been done? And how should the test being completed be transformed into the COA? Who should approve the COA? How should audits be done in the laboratory? How frequent should they be done? What are the laboratory expectations you have for the site that will be manufacturing your products? Pharma, household care, personal care. State the laboratory expectations that you have in your QA, in your quality agreements. It's very important. Okay, great. Then we also talk about, I see, roles and responsibilities. Everyone is responsible for quality. It should be very clear in your QA. Be clear about who does what, who is responsible, what is the expected outcome. For example, your specification, what the liquid should look like when it's released or when it is shipped to you. Remember to always be concise and clear. Great. Who has the responsibility for CGMP? It should be where I'm manufacturing. You are manufacturing for me. You have this responsibility. Please do not contract it out to a vendor. I want you to own it. I own to, you do, and it should be owned by you. You should not subcontract, sub-actual activities. Anything is going to be different from what we've aligned on, then we need to revisit it. Responsibilities, most of the responsibilities come directly from regulations and guidance documents, and they are required to be written and be followed. So we're still talking about documentation, how things should be properly documented before we go further. So here, I've been able to show us what the different responsibilities could be from the owner side and also from the third party side. So the owner, like I mentioned earlier, I have the responsibility to approve and reject products. You can review all the batch records, do all your internal approvals and all of that, create a disposition on the product from your end, but I will review and approve executed batch records. You need to be able to define this. I will audit and evaluate contract facilities. I will approve changes. You can review the changes, you can write the changes, you can notify me on the changes, but I will approve them before you can implement them. So once there's a change that needs to be implemented, please notify me. And this is the number of days that I expect notification, then I will approve them. So what the CMO, the EMO, for the third-party contractor should be focused on is providing copies of completed batch record and ISO records to me to review and approve. It could also be that you give them the right to do all of this because you have seen the level of their expertise. So I give you the right to test and release products, then I will review what you have done and just give it go ahead. So all of these things needs to be agreed on, right? Then I will approve subcontractors. like I mentioned this video, I would 100% say, please, subcontractors should be approved by the owner. Self-inspection can be done by you. I will do the external audits, storage and handling testing of product shipment. We will agree who does what, right? You can store, handle, sample, test, approve or reject materials when you receive, but I should be notified. Then I will give the final disposition. All of these are very important to define. Preventing contamination, cross-contamination, and mix-up should be done by you. The operational activities to ensure that GMP is met, current CGMP is met, should be done by you. I will handle the overview of all of this. This is what is expected. Responsible for analytical and manufacturing technology transfer, I will do that. I will take my system and watch and look at your system to ensure that this is properly transferred to you. Analytical test methods, validation, analytical validation can be done for you. Method validation can be done by you. But I will ensure that this process is implemented on your own side. I talked about data integrity initially. You will ensure data integrity. I would audit to be sure that you do data integrity. This is what the owner will do. This is what the third party will do. All of these things are very important that we state and that they are very clear. Who does manufacturing? Who does packaging? Who does labeling? Remember I said, the action will be, you make a bulk liquid for me, I will pack it into bottles, I will label it and send to trade. Or you make everything, ship to me, I do final testing, and I'll ship to trade. It depends, but please, it should be properly stated and clear in your documentation. Who will approve stability protocols? Who will define stability protocol? Who will approve artworks? Who will define artworks? Is it most of these things, reprocessing, most of these actions which are core to your product should be done by the owner, while the operational activities can be done by the CMO or the external manufacturing organization. Great. So these are the things I would say that you should have in mind when defining quality agreements. Ensure it's properly detailed, ensure it is clear and concise, ensure you have one, ensure it details everything that gives you the right quality product, the right quality service, meets regulatory requirements, very important, and ensures that you are not at the point where you need to recall a product because you did not define these details in a quality agreement. Be ready to write a robust quality agreement. If you need help, Dorian Process Services is always here to help you with things like that. So you could reach out if you want to write a robust quality agreement. Available to help you write one, document one, and take you through the process. Ensure both parties have the right quality agreement, and you are fine. Thank you very much. I hope this was helpful. Please do not forget to like, share, and comment, or ask questions where it wasn't clear. I'll be happy to explain further. Thank you very much, and have a great day.